I'm going to ask each of our panel members to make a brief opening statement against this question, lady and gentlemen. And essentially what I want you to answer is, what do you believe is modern political leadership in this country? Let's start with the only lady on the panel today. What does that say, I wonder, about politics in South Africa?
I think first let's start with talking about young people and them being shapers of political discourse. History has shown us that young people have been shapers and they've changed the political discourse over centuries. And even now, that doesn't change the role of South African youth in the 20 years of democracy. So we believe that young people are essentially the people that should shape the country and they shape the future.
The question is a vital one about leadership and political leadership. I think without fail, what's important to note is that South Africa has an amazing opportunity now where I think the new struggle is being shaped, and equally so new leaders are emerging. I think that question, the question about who's going to emerge as strong political leaders, has to do with whoever is going to best articulate South Africa's future and sell it to young people and South Africans. And I think our view simply is to say, when we talk about an equal opportunity society, we don't just pay lip service to it, we hold it to be true. That South Africans, the age that I am, can stand as premier candidates for the largest province and for certainly the most economically strongest province in the country, says a lot about our view on leadership and young people, which says that if you're good enough for the job, you need to be able to do that in any environment that it is. And business has taken the lead. I think it's about time politics caught up to that.
Dr. Masuku, answer the same question.
Thank you. I think the most important thing is to maybe start with the negative, because everybody started with the positive to say that these are the good qualities of political leadership in the modern age. But I think what is important is that the current leaders that we don't want, I think this is what we want to speak about. You know, I don't think we want to speak about a leader that is reckless, a leader that is based on rhetoric, a leader that is dishonest. And I think what we have seen is that the cliche still remains that our leaders will draw our inspiration from our previous generation of leaders who have selfless, who are dedicated, who are at the service of the people, and who are actually visionary, starting from the likes of the great Shaka, Mshweshwe, Yinza, Walter Sisulu, Tambo, Mandela, and others. So we need to grow over and make sure that we are able to emulate that. And visionary is important, and honesty is important, and trustworthy.
Yeah, no, I think my take would be that political leadership, in essence, particularly in South Africa, has been and will always be about young people. Because of their energy, because of the fact that the future in any event belongs to them. In any society, it is the young people who, when trouble comes, are released to go and fight in wars. And it's no different in South Africa. It was a group of young leaders in 1912 who formed the ANC. It was a group of young people in 1944, the Mandelas, who revived that organization from a docile and quiet organization into a militant organization. It was young people again in the early 60s who took up arms in defense of their country. It was a group of young people in 1976 who said enough is enough. And it was the class of 1980 to which I belong. It was also young people then who took up the final battle, which culminated in what we know as CODESA, the CODESA talks, which incidentally took place here in these premises. So once again, I think it is young people who are standing up and saying that this is the era not for political freedom, but an era for economic freedom in our lifetime.
All right. On Khopotse, let's, Adrian Lusson, welcome. It's good to have you. I'm glad you landed safely. Let's get an opening statement from you, just in terms of the broad framework of what we should be looking for in terms of political leadership.
I think the reality is we've got a leadership gap in our country. And because we are at the Future Leaders Convention, we should be saying that in the future, what sort of leaders must emerge out of this group, out of young people of South Africa. And that gap for me is characterized by 4 quick things. One is that we've got a moral crisis, particularly in politics, where principles have been thrown out of the window and expediencies gaining traction. Credibility has lost its currency. across the political spectrum. If you want me to give you examples of each of the parties here and not here, I can do that for a whole day. Right? The second thing is there's a crisis of a lack of embracing competence and a love for embracing mediocrity, right? And it's an extension of this political, if you like, expedience, where people who are excellent and so on are put down, they are shunned, they are marginalized, and I think that is a gap of leadership. The third one is there is a crisis of an inability to confront issues that are facing the country in frank conversations. Right? A lot of people are too diplomatic about what needs to be said. There are very few people who speak out against wrong things across the spectrum. In all political parties, you try and speak out, you'll be in deep trouble. You've got to draw the line or keep quiet. Right? This is what is happening. And then across society, people have been muted, they do not speak out. The last one is the issue of failure to play your part. Because as we were talking this morning, servant leadership is missing. And that is a failure. I mean, there was an uproar in the ANC apparently last week or 2 weeks ago said, no, every graduate must go and do a community. There was an uproar. People said, no, what the hell, no. Just give us jobs as we leave university. But they don't mind if doctors and dentists are going to do community service. But when you say, no, whatever career, you must play your part in building society and not always look up to government. So for me, those are the 4 critical gaps that any leader who's going to be worth our salt, who's going to take us forward, must be able to address it. Must address the issue of moral crisis, lack of moral compass, and embrace competence, learn to talk frankly about what is facing the country, and then play your part.
Just a few brief remarks. I think the ANC Youth League is in a shambles. I think the future and the history of the ANC Youth League was changed when Julius Malema and his team was expelled. Some new kind of body was put into place. I feel sorry for Bandile and you guys. The first big thing you did last week coming out against Advocate Madonsela was also shut down again by the top leadership of the ANC. The DA Youth League, I think, is non-existent. The young leaders in the DA come through the normal ranks. I don't think it's a strong movement that's out there. I think the EFF has by far been most successful in putting out young leaders out there. It's got a lot to do. I mean, the answer is obvious. It's because of Julius's profile, the fact that he was able to take over a militant youth league which was already built by Fikile Mbalula and others before him. I think Julius has taken that momentum with him to the EFF, and it's going to be interesting to see how it turns out at the voter box, because I do think it's difficult to get those people to the voter boxes. A lot of those youngsters aren't registered. That's what the statistics from the IAC shows. Advocate Hofu on my left, you guys must probably have some buses already in voters there. Another interesting phenomenon that I've seen emerging over the past few years is young people organizing themselves outside the political realm in interesting groups. You've got someone like AfriForum Youth, who is very specifically focused on issues of affirmative action, issues of access to universities based on the ground of race, that kind of thing. So I think that's been an interesting emergence for me. Those are people, young people who group themselves and form power groups outside the formal political stream. Also lots of new NGOs coming up in every kind of sector, energy, environment, etc. Something that concerns me is the lack of obvious future planning in the ANC. If I look at the ANC today, the party will still be the ruling party for a number of years to come. I don't see any obvious presidential contenders in the party, and people who are being groomed. And if you work in the private sector, you'll know that management planning and future succession planning is an integral part of the success of any organization. That concerns me.
Gee, how you escaped? Musa Maimani. Let's, and Adrian, thank you very much indeed for lighting the blue touch paper. I think this sets us off on a very interesting trajectory. The Democratic Alliance is non-existent.
I find that comment unfair, because even when you take a list process of the DA, you'll appreciate that if you look for young MPs, they're in the DA. So what we've tried to steer away from is to say to ourselves, fine, here's a youth organization, we run an exceptional young leaders program, that many of the young politicians, I can talk about Tim Harris, our Shadow Minister of Finance, I can talk about many of the young South Africans who are in leadership at the moment, have in fact come through the program. I think someone like Lindiwe Mazibuko is a prime example. He's a young South African who's the leader of the opposition. So I think it's not about just creating sometimes these parallel structures, and I would agree. I think our youth program, our youth league, if I was to call it that, needs to do a lot more work, and I think they're starting to work on it. But without fail, what we've tried to do is not to create an ageism and a separateness. We've deliberately tried to say when you create diversity in an organization, it can't just be a function of just gender or race. It must also be about age, and so you need young people at the highest levels of your decision-making process.
Bandile Masuku, would you like to respond to the shambles comment?
Yeah, I thought will actually be very frank and say that we are in these problems because of Julius Malema. Then the complete picture of what you said, because you gave a skewed picture. He took a reckless path, a path that I said it's not the path that we want. Reckless path based on rhetoric, based on no evidence, and that's where we find ourselves in. We are in this mess as the league because of it. But essentially what we need to say is that yes, indeed, you might see us as in a mess, but in a very fair way, you would say that in the terms of rebuilding, we are in the process and we are doing fairly well, and what we want to entrust in the legacy that we're going to live on for the coming generation of the youth league is the qualities that we spoke about in terms of be at service, be trustworthy, be dedicated, and be selfless. And those are the things that, as I spoke before, that we take from our previous leaders. And those are the legacy that we have learned from them, and this is what we have learned. And that's the dedication that we are speaking about. But currently, as you say rightfully, is that yes, we are in a mess, but we know why, and the answer is on my right side. With the DA side, on the side of the DA, the fact of the matter is, you see, is that DA people are not members, they're employed in DA. And that's what we need to mention. It must be very frank. We must be saying very clearly that you advertise posts for people that if you want to be an MP, come and not join the DA, but be employed by the DA.
Very
so
maybe
Lucy is employed by the DA also.
I would hope, Bandile, you would at some point on a Friday afternoon come to a sober point. Because here's the problem. I am struggling. Let me clarify this absolute critical point. Of course we advertise.
Let the man talk, please. Thank you.
Of course we advertise. We're not ashamed of that. Because we don't believe that political leadership and being in government must be a reward for comrades and say to yourself, like public service is like a golden watch for your attention. We want the best to work. That's what we want, and we'll advertise as far as wide as possible. If there are young leaders here who say, I want to serve my country, the DA is the place where you can come in and serve, and we'll make it easy for you.
Dali and Blofeld, let's talk about Adrian's other observation, essentially a party that is driven by one man and a beret.
That's not what Adrian said.
I'm paraphrasing.
He said the exact
In an
opposite,
entertaining way.
that the EFF was the only party which showed young leadership, and he was right. But I think before we get to Adrian, let me just quickly deal with this small issue here. You see, people will always find every excuse to explain their predicament. The predicament of the ANC is caused by none other than the lack of leadership, starting right at the head of Jacob Zuma. Let me explain to you. In my opening statement, I made references of young people taking up the fight. In 1944, the ANC was, as I said, a very docile organization. A few young people, Nelson Mandela, Walter Sisulu, Anton Lembede, and others, realized that enough was enough. They injected a radical program which was called Freedom in Our Lifetime. After they injected that program, the ANC for the very first time had 100,000 members because it was appealing to the people. Again, young people say that we need to re-inject energy into economic freedom in our lifetime, and a failure of leadership, faced with the same circumstances, what did Jacob Zuma, the Nkandla men do, kick them out. And that is exactly why the ANC is in a predicament right now, where it does not have the support of COSATU, its traditional ally, and it doesn't have a youth league, but has an appointed structure called the NTT or something like that, which was elected by nobody.
I want to bring a hum into this point, and I want you to explain to us, in Yameka, your relevance. You had a one-night stand with the Democratic Alliance, which ended disastrously. Explain to us your relevance. Why on earth we should even be engaging with you in this debate? We've got the big three here.
I think let's just start with Moisu. It's quite interesting that you say that young people go and apply and then they become leaders and everything. In the Western Cape, it's contrary, because the entire cabinet is male and it's white and it's old. So I don't understand where this thing comes from that you pretend.
First of all, Nyamega, you will accept that when the ANC was in government in the Western Cape, 40% of the people who worked for the Western Cape government were in fact were from the previously disadvantaged category. When the DA came in place, we've increased the percentage to 76%. Please accept the point I also make about the fact that in every one of our structures, whether it's in parliament, whether it's in any other leadership role, that is occupied by young South Africans who are in fact of a different color. So we can't just simply judge a national party, unlike a party with a few people. We can't judge it on the basis of saying one platform. When you then sit back and you say, understand, here's the landscape of the country, you can accept the fact that we are bleeding leaders in every sector of society.
And then I want to talk about the ANC Youth League that talks about the mess that Julius has made.
You haven't answered my question.
Coming to your question.
I want you to answer my question first. And I want you to explain the relevance to it.
The relevance. AHAM is a new political party. It is relevant. It has a youth forum. I'm the convener of it. And we just gone to a national conference a few weeks ago. And our policy positions are practical and provide a solution to the South African society. And what we're saying, for instance, I'm a 23-year-old. I'm in the national list of AHAM SA to Parliament. And we take leadership and we embrace young people to say that we can provide a platform for them to develop and be leaders. So we take leadership seriously in AHAM, and we say that young people have got an opportunity to go and lead.
I've let this breathe, I've let this ventilate a little bit.
Yeah.
Give us a sense of where you think this discussion is going right now. We're not really hitting the issues, are we? We're getting into a catfight.
Yeah, and that's what's happening generally in public discourse. If you want to hear a view about youth issues and so on, it's not going to be coming fast. But if you want to hear insults about how the public protector must see the back of her or whatever
He's got a big nose,
that
yes.
is what, yeah, then you will get 5 youth organizations talking. What is needed is youth organizations to start focusing on things that matter to young people.
Adrian, what matters right now to young people?
Well, I think if we have to narrow it down to a number of issues, the first on top would be for me poverty and unemployment. I mean, that is by far the biggest challenge that our country faces. The unemployment figures for young people are just staggering. There's millions of young boys and girls who sit at home every day, who don't have a proper school education because our school system is falling apart. And they're unemployable. They are not skilled and qualified. That for me, and to fix it, I would say, is education. So those three combined, I think, is the biggest challenge of our lifetime. And I have not yet heard the guys on my left and the lady to my right say how they are going to fix it.
And that's exactly where we're going. And let's start with Dr. Maseku. Let's talk about the plan, shall we? Okay. We have acknowledged that education is an issue in this country, and that unemployment is now beyond a crisis. What's the plan as far as your organisation is concerned? How would you make it better?
Yeah, I think we're already in the process of fixing up education. From 2009, the ANC had adopted a 10-point plan which speaks about different levels of interventions that we've put into place. Because research has shown that there are two basic things that needs to be done: is to increase time in the classroom and teaching. which can actually improve education. And I think that's what we're in the process of doing. The early childhood education also has actually increased its coverage as was part of the 10-point plan. So the 10-point plan cannot be judged over a 5-year period. It needs more time, and it needs the 10 years or maybe the 15-year review, which we'll do. And I think we are in the good process of actually improving education in a broader sense, because poverty still plays a tremendous role in affecting education. So we are not going to change much in terms of education, but we're just going to improve what we have not been doing well in the last 5 years, and the 10-point plan is in place.
I think I want to agree with Adrian. The most critical issue is, in fact, how do we create jobs in this country? Because we believe principally that the best way out of poverty is through a job. We believe that vitally, if we can create an enabling environment for small businesses to thrive, we can talk about a revolution of youth entrepreneurs that will in fact create SMMEs that will employ more people. This is not to the detriment of the government's intervention. It's about saying that let governments create the enabling environment. So when we talk about even the discussion about education, we must talk about education that links to jobs. We must talk about an education supply chain that says to yourself, we've got to take a young person out of school who is employable. Because let's take that young person, and I'm daring here to say without fail that here in Gauteng, what we're going to make sure is that at least every young person who comes out of school has a tablet on their hand, has in fact an ability to enter into the internet, has got a skill that they can sell, and has an opportunity at which they can make sure that they start their own small businesses if that's what they need. It's no accident that when we talk about youth, we haven't paid lip service to it. We marched for the youth wage subsidy. Not because we think the youth wage subsidy is a panacea to all problems of youth employment, but we believe it's a starting point. Because when I speak to young people about why they're not working, they tell me they can't find experience. We're saying, give them at least 2 years experience that they can work so that they can get the right skills that can be able to empower them for the future.
Let's go to the EFF.
Anyone who hasn't heard what the EFF says about education then hasn't even begun to understand why we get vilified about nationalization and all those things. We say very clearly that one of the reasons we ask for nationalization of mines, for example, is so that we can fulfill what is the third non-negotiable pillar of our manifesto, which is free education for every child until the first degree. And that is the specific reason why we say that the state should play that role. We go further in our manifesto and talk about early child development programs which must be introduced. We talk about building of new universities. We talk about adult-based education. But more importantly, we've committed in black and white, the only party that has committed in black and white, that if we get into power, in the first 5 years, no children will be learning in mud schools and under trees. And if that is not a clear education policy, which is underpinned by our very economic policy, then nothing ever will be.
Let's go to Ham.
In 2002, there was just over 1 million of students that enrolled for grade 1. And then in 2013, just half of that passed matric. And within that 500,000 and odd, you'll find that only about 30% were eligible to get university entrances. Now that for us shows there is a serious problem in our education system. So as the Ham SA was saying, in those small numbers, our government says our students must get 30%. We are saying we want to raise the bar high. We want to introduce 50% so that each and every student can be. Okay, and then on top of that, you've got about 5 to 6 billion that is in the SETAs. We're saying that each and every young person in South Africa should get free education, and we can redirect that funding that is wasted in the SETAs into the education sector so that young people can start from grade 0 up until to undergraduate level and get free education. And they will repay the state by working for the state, and they will be placed in positions which they've studied for. So if you've got a student that has studied accounting, then they will be placed as an accountant in the state. Also, what we're saying is that we do not know the competency of our teachers in our schools. We need to develop mechanisms whereby we can be able to test the competence of our teachers, because we do not know, our government cannot tell us what are the quality of teaching that they're providing to the students.
Thank you very much, Rita. I'm going to leave it there. Reports, and Adrian, are you convinced?
Not not particularly. You see, quickly.
By anyone.
Yeah, you see, the ANC has spent its highest expenditures on education. So anybody coming up with something else needs to beat that, right? But the youth leadership of the ANC and all the parties must be able to say, what is the one or two things we can do as a campaign to ensure that education is given even more priority by communities, by government. For example, 80% of our schools don't have libraries. I mean, it's shocking. But do you have a library project by any of these parties where there are books all over the world which can be delivered here if somebody made the time to make it a project to deliver these books to schools? It's not happening. The DA closes schools in the Western Cape, in the middle of all of that. Right? They close schools, you don't know. Then they think that if they give you a voucher, then you stop all morning about handouts gone where. But I'm sure they have an explanation. Musi can explain anything. EFF likes gimmicks. Now they want to tell us a tired and old thing. Obviously, nobody wants a mad school. Now, that can't be an election issue that we're going to have on, because it's obvious. No, but I'm saying it's obvious that mad schools must be eradicated. It's already a program of government budgeted for. You need to read the budget.
For 20 years.
But you need to read the budget to see what is already a plan. Give us something fresh and new. Aham is simply...
No, wait, just a minute. Firstly, you must explain why the ANC has two representatives here.
No, that's not fact. I know people want to wish away the good work that has been done over the last 20 years. You can't.
Are you speaking on behalf of the ANC?
Not at all. I'm saying that the country has achieved certain things. It's a reality of the budget that the biggest budget is for education.
Let's come to you very quickly. I'll come to you.
Aham must check the facts of the CETA's effect is 11 billion, not 6 billion. As you speak now, the current budget is 11. You don't need to nationalize anything to actually make everybody have free education. That's only a decision that must be implemented, must be budgeted. That's all there.
Jeremy, there's a huge gap between government programs that are there, government functions that are there, millions and millions of rands spent through CETAs and FET colleges and other programs which are not accessible to masses of people. There's a huge gap between poor people being raised by illiterate parents who didn't have the privilege to get decent schooling, cannot assist them, who don't have laptops, who don't have internet cables at home, who can't and who don't have finances to enroll them into these colleges. That's what we must fix somehow. I don't know how. I've heard some interesting things. Musi says every matriculant must leave with a tablet. I hope they can spell as well, because spelling is even more important than having a tablet. And the ANC's 10-point plan, I'd like to see that. I agree with time in the classroom. Free education, fantastic idea if we can afford it. I'm not sure if we can afford it. I have to see your budget. And I think the stat that you started with is very powerful. And I'll end there. That dropout rate of 500,000 people has not been explained properly. Where are those kids that started grade 1 in 2012? 500,000 of them were missing.
And that in itself is a terrible indictment. I want an answer to this question in conclusion. What should tomorrow's leaders be demanding of their political leaders?
How do we build tomorrow? I think we build tomorrow firstly by ensuring that we get back the moral compass, right, of our founding fathers, of all these political parties. All of them are connected at the root. If you trace all the histories of all the people sitting here, somewhere there are founding fathers who we collectively share, who wanted certain things about freedom and Ubuntu. Very few parties, if you go and check their manifesto, you find something about Ubuntu, or even if it's there to be a fleeting mention of it. And I've made up a way, how do we hold each other Ubuntu accountable, right? And begin to, not to think morals are not important, and then we find some explanations for indefensible things that are happening across the leadership spectrum. That's the first thing, moral compass. Secondly, a love for excellence. This country is not short of resources. That one I can tell you, right? So you're not going to solve it by throwing money at it, wherever you get it. You've got to solve the issue of competence of professionals in the civil service. and not blaming their past all the time, instead of saying that some civil servants who are lazy, they must get out, make it easy to fire people who don't work in government, because that affects service delivery. That's why we have 32 protests every day. So separate politicians, because whoever wins, they'll be all the same, they're selfish, they're not going to think of you. Separate that from civil service, who work, regardless of which political party wins, they are dedicated to serving the people. So the people are not in the streets complaining about their money being spent.
Thank you very much. Adrian Besson, answer please to the same question.
Short, I think our leaders, our youth of today and tomorrow, need to lift the debate out of the gutter. I don't think we need to, this is a time to talk about people's noses and their hair. I think this is a time to look at their reports, to read what they've written, for us to insist to know what's going on. Empower yourselves. Don't wait for one big leader to solve your life. This is not going to happen. And I think this generation is already doing that, Jeremy. I think this is a generation of self-doers. In fact, it scares the hell out of me if I see how little of young people vote. Because more people didn't vote in the previous election than the amount of people who voted for the ANC. That means if all those people voted, they were going to rule the country. And I think a large majority of them are young people. So make your vote count. If you're not happy, make people beg for your vote. Make people deserve your vote. Read widely, read the manifests. Look at what if people do what they preach. And as I said previously, education, I think, is the biggest struggle of our lifetime. So look for a revolution in education, how to fix education.
Darling Pofu.
Yeah, well, I'll pick it up where Adrian has left it, revolution. I think that what we need is, honestly, revolutionary thinking, which means changing the script. The problem is that we have conformed to the same script that was prescribed for 60 years ago, and we've simply changed the color of the leadership. What you need to do is actually demand a radical shift from the culture of capitalist thinking, which is embedded in individualism, me, I must get rich before the next person, and so on, into a new culture of servant leadership, of service, of giving, of yourself, because those people who fought for us gave their own lives for us. And what we really need is to get these people to be able to not think about when am I going to get the next Mercedes-Benz, but when are the people who do not have toilets going to get toilets, who are using the bucket system as we speak here.
Let's hear from the ANC Youth League.
Ms. Ntuli said it very well in the last panel. I think the issue of being at service was actually covered, that we also have to take initiative. Because the other problem that we have faced is that we have actually treated the culture of dependence and the culture of entitlement. And we have actually demobilized ourselves as society. I'm sure ANC can take a blame of that. That we've demobilized society, that society doesn't take initiatives anymore. Adrian, society, if they take education serious, they wouldn't wait for government to do a lot of things. They would do things for themselves, and they will take up the township and make sure they mobilize. We have done that before, but because we have now get into that space of entitlement, that's where the problem is. And I think the future is not recklessness. Let's not vulgarize revolution about recklessness, because the language that Andrew speaks about people commenting about noses and hair, it was made popular. People clapped hands when people said it before, and they still continue to say it, and they made it popular because of that. And I think that's not the type of leadership we want. We want a leadership that is well profound, that is at service, and that is well knowledgeable. And I think that's the most important thing, and I think that's what we provide. The legacy we have of 102 years, we transcend generation, we transcend Jacob Zuma, we transcend Thabo Mbeki. The ANC will continue to exist, and it will continue to breed new leaders, and leaders will be going to take the continent forward.
Thank you very much indeed. The Democratic Alliance.
I can agree with a lot of the sentiment that's been put forward. I think if I recall in 1994, under a moral leader such as Nelson Mandela, as authoritative as that was, part of what in fact happened in society is that South Africans, in many ways, we gave our agency and said we'll give it to political leadership. And perhaps it was critical at the time. When we get to 2014, my ask and my invitation to everyone here today is that we need to take that back. We need to take agency back. We need to remind ourselves that politicians are servants of the people, not the other way around. That in fact what we must be doing is, I will invite every single one of us sitting here today, that don't buy what politicians say at face value. Interrogate. Please give me a tough time. Please make sure that in fact when we talk about leadership, part of the failures that we see in leadership is because we've permitted some of them. When someone buys a 1.3 million rand car and we accept that as though it must be celebrated, it is a challenge when they're using taxpayers' money. I invite you here today that we must resurrect communities, civil society. We must make sure that churches become louder and faith-based communities. We must make sure that business holds government to account. We must make sure that as you sit here as young South Africans, don't let politicians have an easy ride. I ask you to be critical, to question, and in fact to hold us account through voting. And if we are wrong, vote the person out. It's as simple as that.
Aha.
I think that as leaders also, we need to assist our fellow citizens to raise their level of consciousness, both black and white citizens. We need to understand the power of our vote. We need to understand that to change things, we need to exercise our rights that are enshrined in our constitution. We've seen the ANC, that is a liberation movement, that feels that it has an entitlement to corruption, to loot state resources. We've seen the EFF with its rhetoric that talks about they will double social grants and perpetuate this level of dependency in our...
You're not answering the question. Okay? Seriously, with the greatest respect, the question I put to you is, what should tomorrow's leaders be expecting of political leaders now? And Nyameka, with the greatest of respect, can we have a closing statement? Okay?
In my closing remarks, I'm saying the power of young people is in their vote. If you don't like something, vote that political party out. But as young leaders, we're saying let's take charge of our future. Let us be active citizens and let us shape what we'd like to see in our country.
Thank you very much indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, that's it. I'm not entirely sure what you got out of it. I'm delighted that we touched on so many points to each and every one of the panel members. I wish all of you good luck over what is going to be a very robust political season.